Pixar villains. Can you talk a little bit about how Pixar creates those villains? Because in my mind, there aren't any villains that I can think of that steal the show. The protagonist generally is the one who like Darth Vader steals the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hannibal Lecter stole the show, like completely. But in Pixar, the villains are good. Like in Incredibles, he was great, the kid, and it was really complex. But they don't steal the show. What is a Pixar villain?
Well, I think that's actually a great point that I haven't quite thought of that way. And I think the main reason is because Pixar often places the bulk of the antagonism on what I call a troublesome villain or a troublesome antagonist. And that's someone who isn't evil, isn't malicious, someone means well, but he's just in the protagonist's way, like Buzz and Woody, right? Buzz is in Woody's way. He's his main form of conflict. He's in no way, shape, or form a villain.
There
right?
really isn't a villain other than what's his kid, that crazy kid across the
crazy
Sid.
Kid.
Sid is as close to a villain as we get, and he gets what he deserves. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So I think they often even Up has a clear villain, right? I don't remember his name. Munt.
Exactly. I don't remember his name. You see that? Is he
right?
I can picture him, and I know he has the dogs, and that was it. I don't remember, but I remember the bird, squirrel, the kid, the balloon, the dog, the dog. It was great. All of that I remember. But the villain is kind of like in the background.
Because most of the conflict in that movie is between him and the kid, or him and himself, and a lot of nature. There's a lot of we talked about, same thing with Finding Nemo, right? It's a lot about the ocean, the obstacles. And when Pixar does have a villain, they are very often so humanized. Lotso, who's as evil a villain as Pixar may have made, gets that amazing flashback about how he was left out and he made back and he was replaced, and and then he also becomes a mirror image of Woody, who has the same fears. And when you watch Toy Story 3, you're like, oh, if Woody doesn't get over Andy, he could become Lotso, right? So even when they have someone who's more nefarious, they often give them very human reasons for why they're doing it. And I think my favorite Pixar villain, who's also, I wouldn't call him a villain, is Anton Ego, right? Who's really designed as I broke it down for a lecture I gave, and there's a top shot of his office, and it's the shape of a coffin. In the first minutes of the film, he's introduced as the Grim Eater. Like, he's really
so good. Good. But he ends up not being a villain. That was which is brilliant in Ratatouille. It is just so. It's fascinating, but I've always heard, and I've had so many amazing guests on the show who know story and screenwriters and consultants and scholars, and the consensus is, in order to have a good protagonist, you need a good antagonist. But Pixar kind of breaks that rule.
So I would flip that definition. You don't necessarily need a good antagonist. You need good antagonistic forces.
Correct. Yeah, because Finding Nemo is a perfect example.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no villain in that movie. There's nothing that's villainous.
There's the girl. There's the little girl with the...
But that's Sid. That's Sid. Yeah, but that's basically Sid. It's like... It's not a villain. It's just... It's a little girl who's doing what a little girl does.
Yeah.
It's nature. Sid is nature. He's on the different spectrum of nature, meaning that he's a little bit, but how many of us don't know that kid?
Yeah. So they always have these forces, but not necessarily a clear-cut villain. And I think that it goes back very much to what we talked about, what makes them unique. Because when you make a story, you have a limited amount of real estate, right? And the more time you spend on, a Dr. Evil villain, it's time you're not spending with conflict that brings out your character, or with that troublesome antagonist who's a friend and an ally, but you can bond with them, and then both of you have to grow, right? It's less ways of developing the world. Like think about Inside Out, right? Where you have maybe that clown or you have all these other things, but a lot of it is physical. And the main antagonist is sadness, right? She's the one who's stopping Joy from making Riley happy.
But she's so passive aggressive.
Yeah.
She's so passive aggressive. It's not even funny. She's not like twirling her. She's just like, I'm sad. This is what I do. I'm sorry.
This is what I do. I mean, when you think about Inside Out, the problem in Inside Out is that Joy refuses to let Riley not be happy. If in the beginning of the film, Joy went like, oh yeah, sure, no problem, let her be sad, there'd be no movie. She is, I don't say she's the villain, but the problem is with her. And Pixar, to an extent, does that in a lot of their movies. The problem, the real problem, right? Like Bug's Life has the grasshoppers. But I think the more Pixar went on, the more they went away from those real villains. And even in WALL-E, right, where you have that autopilot, Otto.
Hal. Basically Hal. Yeah, Hal.
Hal, yeah, basically Hal. He's trying to protect humanity, right? It's from a good place. And eventually they defeat him, of course. But he's an opposite of WALL-E in many ways. And if he had all the information, if he believed that Earth had a chance, he would let them come back. He just doesn't think they have a chance.
It's remarkable. And I'm thinking of films in the zeitgeist that have this non-villain-esque, because obviously Star Wars has Darth Vader. It's such a clear archetypal, hero's journey story. But you look at a movie like Forrest Gump. I mean, Forrest Gump is very Pixar-esque in its storytelling. I mean, without the drugs and the sex and stuff. But there is no villain. Jenny is the closest thing we have to a villain. And listen. We could have a conversation. Jenny. Look, if Jenny was out of Forrest's life completely, but Jenny is as close, like I said, as close to a villainous thing. And it's not something that she's trying to hurt Forrest. Yeah. She's just who she is. She is sadness, doing what sadness does. And she's been doing it because of all of the baggage and things that she dealt with as a child that she carries along throughout her entire life. But Forrest, his main antagonist is the world, who doesn't understand him. He just goes, just completely oblivious through life.
And in many ways, I never thought about it because it was just about, as you were talking, it was like, what does Forrest Gump want? What is driving him? Like all these things we're talking about, you'd be hard pressed to say, oh, Forrest Gump deeply wants maybe Jenny, but even that doesn't, I wouldn't say that drives the whole film. And the way you said it with the world as an antagonist, I would say Forrest Gump is watching scene after scene how Forrest Gump goes to somewhere that won't accept him or that he shouldn't belong or that he shouldn't thrive at, and finding a way, either through his sort of earnestness or through luck, where he does thrive there. Like that's literally what happens.
The entire movie.
Scene.
Yeah, the entire movie, he just fails up. Exactly. He failed, and that's I think one of the things that and it's also, if you take the historical aspect out of Forrest Gump, the story doesn't work. Like the leveling up constantly. Like, okay, he's a great football player. Why? Because he runs. Why did he run? Because he ran away from bullies. It's just something he did, and then that takes him to now he went to Vietnam. How did he get there? Oh, here's ran. Boom, and he meets 3 presidents, and he does like if you take those aspects out, well, then the story doesn't have. It's just a dude just walking through life. But because everything gets amped up constantly, like, we invested in this little fruit company called Apple, and we don't have to worry about money no more. Like it's almost a dreamlike thing because you're like, man, wouldn't it be amazing if as the person listening, like, wouldn't it be amazing to go through life just constantly just winning without even trying?
Yeah.
But the one thing he can't win at.
He's so vulnerable. Like he succeeds, but he's so.
But the one thing that the thing that he struggles for is Jenny. Yeah. Jenny's the only thing he can't, it doesn't fall into his lap. Everything else falls into his lap. Right. But Jenny does not fall into his lap. And that is basically the arc. Like, without Jenny, there's no movie. And Lieutenant Dan is just the, whatchamacallit, the
ally antagonist.
Yeah, ally antagonist, exactly, through the whole thing. And he just kind of, he doesn't really affect Forrest doesn't, he changes, but he doesn't change a whole lot.
No, Forrest doesn't change.
No, I mean, he
Lieutenant Dan changes.
Oh, everybody else around him changes.
Exactly, yeah.
Even his mom, every character he touches changes perception thing. But so going back to Pixar, it is as close to a Pixar film as I could think of in the real world.
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to think about movies, other movies that don't have villains. And one movie that came to mind is, in a way, Ordinary People. And I think people would rush to say, "Oh, the mom's the villain," but you can't say that. Everyone there is so hurt and vulnerable. Everyone there, like, it's the situation where, you know, the father can't lead, the mom is unable to give the child the love he needs. He's going through his own thing that he needs to forgive, and so they're really just problems to each other. No one is literally, if we talked about tailor-made catastrophes, the worst thing a mom like that could get is a child who needs her love, a vulnerable child who needs her love. The worst thing that father character could get is a broken family that needs him to lead it, right? It's separately, all of them are fine. Just when you sort of put them in opposition to each other, when the tragedy happens.